The next month for the Pacers, critical as they try to figure out who they are and what they need to be. Plus, Tyrese Haliburton, how should they approach his rest of the season? And a deeper dive into Jarace Walker and Johnny Furphy with Jonathan Smith on today's Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, y'all? Happy Friday. Congrats. You made it through the weekend. Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes. And today, much to discuss about the Pacers as they finally play against Philly. We talk about the Sixers at the end of this, but a lot more about the next month ahead for the Pacers. I had a question I got asked on the midday show on 107.5 The Fan that I want to talk about with someone else today, and that is approaching Tyrese Haliburton's health for the rest of this season. So Jonathan Smith from 1430 The Ticket and I today discuss the next month for the Pacers, what they need to show and approach it, in what ways to determine what they'll do for the deadline and how they approach the rest of the season. Plus Tyrese Haliburton's health. Is there anything the Pacers should or can do to manage this? And we also get in deeper on Jarus Walker and Johnny Furphy, how they're playing before talking some Sixers. Lots of fun stuff in this episode. Hope you enjoy it with Jonathan Smith. Let's just hop right in. We talk every week, but this week we're doing it here instead of somewhere else. It's Jonathan Smith from The Ticket 1430. We talk all the time about the Pacers and the Fever. Today, it's Pacers only because boy, oh boy, Jonathan, do they have a big month coming up before January 15th? And then, oh boy, there's that trade deadline hanging over. And like, hey, holy cow, the schedule's pretty scary. It's a huge next 30 days for this team. Before we talk about that, how are you? Are you enjoying what you can of this Pacers start that has been not a very fun basketball season so far?
I've enjoyed the nights where Tyrese Haliburton's played well. those are few and far between. But it's just been disappointing. I think that's really the best word for it. I think we all had some pretty high expectations for them coming into the season after what happened last year, and they have not lived up to any of them.
I talked about this before the season with a couple of people. I think even you, like the year when a team smashes expectations finally, it's the most fun one for fans, right? The Rockets are doing it right now, and the Pacers did it last year. And, there's always a team or two that does it every season. And then the next year expectations come. And even if you're the same level of good, when expectations there, it doesn't feel the same, right? It's not as fun. Ask the Sacramento Kings. The problem for the Pacers is they have been worse. It's not that they haven't been as good as last year, that they've been significantly worse for 10,000 reasons. And their next month is a lot for what this season will be. A lot of people have their answer about what this team is, and they're totally fine to do so. I'm not going to say they're right or wrong, but they're 10-15, and the next month headlined by a road trip starting a week from you and I talking, 6 days from when this comes out, with Phoenix, Sacramento, Golden State. Thankfully, they get to come back home for a nice, easy one against OKC. Then on the road for 2 in Boston in a row, then Milwaukee, then at Miami, then versus Phoenix. That is right after these next 2 games that they have is their next 9, right? Like, will they be the favorites in a single one of those games? Maybe Milwaukee at home, probably not. Maybe Phoenix at home, probably not. So, I mean, they're 10-15 now. They have 11 games, including the 2 before that in that stretch. And there's a chance they're 14-23 by the end of that, right? And that doesn't even account for the rest of the games that would be required to get to a month from now. So, what do they need to show to you in that stretch to not freak out about them picking a direction this season, for lack of a better way to describe why it's such an important month?
Oh man. So first and foremost, we knew this was coming, right? To open the season, the schedule was incredibly light. I believe that the easiest strength of schedule in the NBA, and now we hit this death stretch over the next month. And I just want some sort of consistency. People have really hammered home the issues with Haliburton and kind of the ups and downs there. I really feel like the only consistent player for the Pacers night in and night out this year has been Siakam. Even Mathurin, he'll have nights where he scores 30, and then the next night it's 15. And then you've got Jarace Walker, where some nights I'm like, geez, that guy looks awesome. And then the next 3 games I'm like, did he even play? It says he played 12 minutes.
Talk about him for that exact reason.
Yeah. And so I just want some level of consistency, because I think part of what's so frustrating about them is like you see Tyrese Haliburton score 30 points and have 12 assists against the Knicks, and then they turn around and they play the Hornets and he scores 9 points and he misses, like 13 shots. I just want some form of consistency. I just want something that I know that I can expect night in and night out, because right now it's too up and down.
Yeah, I'm writing about that right now because I agree. That is what's so striking to me, even within games, right? That stretch you highlighted does stand out, where Haliburton had 6 in Charlotte, 35 and 14 against the Knicks, and then 9 in Orlando. What? What? Right? So this, like, even the stretch they just had where they were playing terrible and their results were like very doomy, right? They had the 45-point first quarter against Memphis and the awesome second halves against Toronto and Brooklyn, and like, you point to those moments, you go, look at that good team. And the rest of those games, they sucked, like way worse than the highs of the good parts, and they lose all of them. And all season, it's similar to last year, where they've beaten Boston and Dallas and Miami and New York and Orlando. And like, great, they've lost to Charlotte twice and Toronto twice and Brooklyn and all these bad teams. And that happened last year too. But last year, their peak was much higher, and they were more consistently hitting the higher notes, where this year they're not at all, right? And so I agree with you that the next month showing, even if they go, what did I just said? That was a 9-game stretch plus the 2 they're about to play. Even if they go 5 and 6 and they'll be 15 and 21, I think people would be like, sweet, they survived a hard stretch and like looked kind of good for a little bit, given how their season started. I don't think anyone would actually feel sweet if they go 5 and 6 in that stretch, but given how hard it is, like that'd be some mega wins. So it's crucial that they show something. Honestly, if they just fall flat on their face a bunch, that would be revealing too, because come January 15th, Obi Toppin is the Pacers player, but like every player on the league who will be eligible to trade this year becomes trade eligible, except for like 3 guys who got extended at a certain time. So that's when everything really heats up. The Siakam trade was about mid-January last year, right? So I'm not saying that's when they'll make their decisions, but in my head, if I'm the Pacers, what I have to decide, and it probably changes based on how you're playing, is like, what's the game where we have to know what we're doing for the rest of this season, right? Is it January 20? I'm completely making this up, but is it the Paris trip, right? When we come back from Paris, do we have to know, okay, are we going for it? Are we just getting to the finish line? Are we sellers, right? And that will all be kind of determined by this next month. And so what they show in it and the results both are equally important. It's going to be fascinating to see.
It is. I'm so curious to know what they're going to do. I just want to know what the fix is, really. Like you hear them talk about efforts, which is just like, okay, like whatever. Like that is just a response that you give when you don't know what the answer is. That's kind of what I feel like it is, at least. And like when I watch them play, I don't know. Like I don't understand how inconsistent they are. Because like Haliburton was awesome last year, and then he hurts his hamstring, and even once he got back in rhythm, though, like he was really good again. And I think one of the frustrating parts about all of this is the expectations weren't high because they reached the Eastern Conference Finals last year. They were high because they reached the Eastern Conference Finals, and we knew that we were going to have Siakam for the whole year, and we knew that we were going to have Mathurin for the whole year. And Ben Shepherd really popped. He's been out of the lineup with some injuries and things like that. And so how much impact is it going to have when Nesmith and Ben Shepherd come back and they are consistently playing? I think that's the other thing that I'm really kind of curious to see over this next month.
I agree with that too. The tricky part of that is like when they did have those guys, they were bad early in the season, right? Like when Nesmith got hurt in New Orleans, they were 2-4, right? I think that was the last game he played. They 2-5. I can't count very quickly. And Haliburton had a 0-point game to start the season. Like lots of stuff was going wrong. It wasn't on those guys, but it's what the team's level was. That's part of why I've said, even though I'm high on those guys and I've talked very high about the contracts they've gotten and the play they had last year, like it wouldn't have changed their fortune so much if they were healthy, like 1 or 2 wins for sure. But they've played so bad that they're not making up the gap in a lot of those games. So I am curious to what them being back means for the whole team and rotationally, how they'll choose what they do with Mathurin and all this stuff. But really, is it enough to actually look kind of like last year's teams? They don't have to have any consistency. Can Nesmith be an energy giver in a way that he and McConnell were last year? Because McConnell's certainly given effort every game. Last year, that seeps to everybody. This year, it's kind of having the opposite effect, it feels like. And I agree with you that when people talk about effort, a lot of times it's because they're playing bad. and it's just like a crutch to say, and that's fine. But there are a lot of moments in Pacers games like the ball bounces, like no one dives, and there are a lot of, come on, like get going. What are you doing? So there's some of both to that, I think. Hey everyone, short little break here. We got to talk about Robinhood. With Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.25% APY on uninvested cash and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on IRA account contributions. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at Robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply. For product-specific disclosures, visit Robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risks. Rate may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC. I got this question today, and I want to ask it to you. What I guess the underlying premise of this is you have to believe or think that Haliburton is either playing this way worse because he's banged up, or that he is, between his comments about it feeling like a job sometimes, playing the Olympics in the summer, has some sort of physical or mental exhaustion. Pretend with me, Jonathan, that somehow, some way, the entire rest of the Pacers team is healthy and back and playing all together. And playing kind of well. Not great, but kind of well. Would you try to rest him in any way? I know that people hate that in the NBA, but if the trade-off is, and to be clear, I'm probably saying no before I ask the question. If the trade-off is like 1 or 2 wins short term to win 4 games down the stretch because he looks way better, right? That's why you would do it. But is there any way, like if Nembhard looks great and Neesmith's back and Shepard's back and the rotation's kind of clicking, would you consider something like that? They have the gaps around the Paris games. They have this gap right now, but if that actually is something that could help, would you even think about something like that? I don't think so, but someone asked it to me today. I thought it was an interesting thing.
Yeah, I mean, probably not. But at the same time, like if you want it, like you said, like if Nembhard comes back and he's playing really well and McConnell continues to be McConnell, if you wanted to cut his minutes a little bit, like okay, like that's fine. But if you want to, like, I don't think that you can just sit him out entirely. But like, you know what, buddy, you need like a mental health break.
They can't afford it.
Give you a week off. I don't think that would go over well. First and foremost, with fans. I don't think that'd go over very well with him. Like I know you mentioned his comment about how he said it feels like a job sometimes. Well, like it is a job, so I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah.
But also, he's a competitive guy, and like he seems frustrated by his struggles. And I think looking at him and telling him, you know what, man, we're gonna have you sit for a week. I don't know if that would be the best thing for him either.
Yeah, it's the only reason to do it is what I just described, but they can't afford that trade being wrong. Like if they guess, okay, we'll sacrifice a win or 2 now for more later. If they're wrong and they rest them and it costs them a win, oof. And it has to actually work. Like if he's not any better, like if injuries aren't the reason, right? And I've guessed, I guess is the right word, that's the most logical thing to me for some of his struggles, but he's denied it at every turn. Like if it's not, then obviously you don't rest him because he's not hurt. But it's been peculiar for a guy who's played 2 summers in a row with Team USA. People point at the Olympics a lot, but he did the World Cup last year. He's basically played year-round basketball 2 years in a row. Is there something to that? But on the other hand, again, like right now he has 4 days off, and next week he'll have 3 days off, and before and after Paris he'll have, albeit with some crazy travel, some time off. So maybe that's a stupid premise, but I thought it would require them getting healthy to even get to that point. But if he continues to play really wobbly and like has some games or it's like not moving as well and all that kind of stuff, I thought it was an interesting thing to think about for this team because it's not that he hasn't been as good as last year too. I'm going to poke at fans a little here. People have said like, this is who he is, blah, blah, blah. Okay, whatever. If you think that him getting hurt last year changed who he was, if he was as good as he was 2 years ago, they'd be a better team this year. Forget the All-NBA year. 2 years ago, he was still an all-star and averaged more points per game than he did last year, by the way, and was still over 10 assists per game. It's everything, right? So I don't care about last year. Just like getting to that level even would be a big step for this team. So considering what that could look like is interesting to me, even though I don't necessarily know that it's something the Pacers would consider.
Yeah, like you said, it's really bad. It's worse than it was 2 years ago. Like there are nights where I watch him and I'm like, you know what? He looks like 41-year-old Chris Paul tonight, just with the way that he moves and the lack of intensity at times. It's really puzzling. And maybe he is hurt. I know we talked about that a little bit on my show.
Again, just a guess. We have no idea.
Yes. Right. Yeah. And the other thing is, I obviously, like, whenever you talk about him playing over the summer, the Olympics, I'm like, yeah, like, you played, but, like, you didn't play a ton. Like, sure, like, you went to practice, but, like, he didn't play very many minutes. There were nights where he didn't play at all. And so, like, yeah, like, I get it. Travel and all that stuff is weird, and it weighs on you. But like, if he was LeBron or Curry, where he'd spent time playing, 25 minutes a game against other great players, and you want to say, hey, like, he's got some fatigue, then, like, that makes sense. But with how little he played, I don't know if I'm really buying that.
Yeah, I don't buy it either because, again, last year he played for Team USA and was just fine at the start of last season. And no one else on the Olympics has had this happen to them. So I get why people might want that to be the answer, but I don't believe that is. Would you like to talk about the second-year young wing first or the first-year young wing first? We're going to do both.
Man. Let's talk about Jarus Walker.
Let's talk about Jarus. Okay. This is the question I've been proposing to people about Jarus Walker recently. I would like you to answer it, whatever you think the answer is. Jarus Walker, very, very interesting season. Finally playing, which many had asked a lot for last year. Sometimes quite well. Orlando stands out. Obviously, the game he didn't miss a shot. Defense, some nights on ball looks good, some nights doesn't, where they turn to other options, including their very most recent game. 15 points against Charlotte, looked good. Had that back-to-back nights looking good against Detroit and Memphis very recently. Mm-hmm. Also has a lot of nights where I'm like, you threw that pass like 30 yards over that guy, or you threw that pass with one hand and it got intercepted before it got halfway there. And, they're taking you off of Brandon Miller this time. Like, he has been very interesting to me in that he has really good peaks that make you go, yeah, okay, that's why they're investing in this guy. And, like, I think he's only played 60 games, right? 58 in his whole career, right? Yeah. Still very early. And he has some nights that are super low that are just like, what on earth was going on there? So with that in mind, with every other player, I think, on the Pacers, I can generally give you a why between their best nights and worst nights. Whether it's Obi Toppin and they're not playing fast, he's going to look worse. Or Tyrese Haliburton last year, when he's seeing two guys on this blitz, he's going to play worse. Like, that was a big problem for them right after the NBA Cup. Or Aaron Nesmith's guarding someone 4 inches taller than him, or Myles Turner's playing against Joel Embiid, or Pascal Siakam seeing 2 in the lane the second he catches it on those doubles, right? Like, I can tell you schematically or tempo-wise, or just there's something about the way the game is played that's going to give a player chances to be better or worse, right? I get it for basically everybody else on the team. I have yet to figure out with Jarus Walker what it is about a game that makes him go down the path of good or bad, right? And it's not like an active choice. Why, to you, has there been this gap where some nights we're like, yeah, there we go, there he is, and other nights he looks like a young player who is still learning a lot?
I haven't tracked this, so this could be completely wrong, but this is just an eye test thing. I think nights where he comes in and he touches the ball early and he's very involved in the offense early, it's like it gives him just a little bit more confidence. And that's usually when the shot goes down. That's usually when he's passing the ball well. But there are some nights where, like, he'll come in and he'll play like a quick little 2 or 3 minute stretch, and he sits in the corner and he doesn't really touch the ball. And then there's like, all right, man, go play defense. And then, he does his best. And some nights, it's the NBA. Like, there are going to be nights where guys just don't miss shots. It doesn't really matter who's guarding them. And then there's other nights where you're going to defend really well. So I think that offensively, when he's very involved early, not even in taking shots per se, but just catching the ball and getting to feel it, I feel like there's some sort of correlation there with him playing well the rest of the game. Defensively, I don't know. There are nights where he just looks disengaged, if that makes sense. Like, he just looks a little lackadaisical, especially off the ball. It's kind of more of where I noticed that as opposed to on it. But I think the big thing for him is just when he touches the ball early, he tends to play a little bit better.
Yeah, I like the defense take there. 36% of his games, he has 2 or more steals this season, right? Like, he's been when he's engaged, he looks really good with the steals and the blocks sometimes, right? And I actually landed on the same conclusion as you, that it's somewhat a confidence thing. for a young player who also, like, not to compare them because they're 4 years apart in age, but like, Ben Shepherd last year hit the floor and came in, was just like not afraid of mistakes, but also didn't make very many, and did a lot of stuff that really helped the team in a way that Jarace didn't. And so I think for him, it hasn't come as natural to just play that free and that spaced out and that confident right away when it's like he's a 19-year-old or 20-year-old, whatever, playing in the NBA versus Shepherd at his age. But he saw another guy do it, and like Furphy's kind of doing it right now. So again, at his best, he looks good. And like statistically, Jarace has been like a lot better than last year. True shooting percentage is up 3%. Free throw rate's way up. Rebound rate's up. Steal rate is up. Right. Defensive impact stats are up. Now, problematically, his turnover rate is way up. Way up. Yeah. His assist rate's down a little bit. Right. But in general, like he looks better than last year. That's good. That's progress. He has games like once a week now. We're like, yeah, okay. But I think he and the Pacers need to figure out what is causing that gap to be wide. And if it's confidence, how they get him to be engaged and locked in and focused for however many minutes he plays in a night, where he's not throwing passes that are confusing or doesn't look in the way or isn't so. This isn't the right word because the shot takes a while to get up, but he's very hesitant to shoot, right? All sorts of stuff like that, because on games where he does make an early three or does get the ball moving just in the flow of the offense or does get a quick steal, stop, blow up a play, whatever, he looks great. And he had a summer league that at least people around the league are pretty excited about. So I'll be curious what the next step for him is as he approaches like what would be the back half of a first season, playing game 59 coming up. But it's been very interesting to me trying to figure out what about a game, if there is anything, or if it's just on Jarace, is the difference between his best and worst nights.
I think the other thing to keep in mind comparing him to like Johnny Furphy and Ben Shepherd last year is when you watched, first off, Ben Shepherd played college basketball for 4 years. Like he's played more. And when he was at Belmont, his role was pretty similar to what he does now. If you're open, shoot. If not, move it and keep moving. Johnny Furphy at Kansas, pretty similar role. Shoot it if you're open. If not, you can put it on the floor from time to time. But for the most part, other guys are going to run the offense. For Jarus Walker, like this is the first time in his life he's having to play like off the ball consistently. Like when he was at Houston, they gave him the ball and he could kind of do whatever he wanted. And I think that it's really hard for these young guys at 18, 19, and 20 years old to learn how to play without the ball in their hands for the first time at the highest level of basketball in the world. So part of the inconsistency could also be him just figuring out how to do that on a consistent basis.
One more break here, guys. We got to talk about the great folks over at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL season and jump into the NBA action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win that wager. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. When you get that hunch in the middle of a game, you think you know what's coming. Well, you can check out the latest stats from the action. You can view live play-by-play and so much more right on the same page where you'd place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That is on FanDuel.com, so never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. I agree. I think, like with Myles Turner early in his career, confidence could be a big part of this, like if he's ever unleashed in some way that could help. But it's been very fascinating to me to try to figure out what it is that lands him on these games. On the flip side, let's talk about the first-year wing, because who saw this coming? Johnny Furphy has been in the Pacers rotation 4 of their last 5 games on merit. Like he's outplayed other people who were playing and has taken their spot in the rotation, and no one has been like, yes, this is the wrong move. Like everybody thinks that this is right, including the 25-minute game you had in Brooklyn last week where he hit 4 threes and literally almost turned it around for them in that game. Like if they had won that game because of a comeback, I would have led talking about that game, talking about Johnny Furphy. But in Memphis, he was in the rotation for a second, a bunch of minutes against Brooklyn, Chicago, and Charlotte, he was in the rotation. And again, this is on merit. He's making shots to an extent, especially from 3. The thing that stands out about this, Rick Carlisle joked at practice today that he looks like a middle schooler, but he does not play like that, right? Like he, despite looking kind of scrawny and thin, plays pretty physical and like hits on the glass. And if you're making threes, and even if you're not a good defender, if you're just playing physical, you're going to get on the floor, even if it's just 8 to 10 minutes a night. And so I think it's been fascinating to see him, even though if his shot goes away, he shouldn't play, right? Like the line between him being good and him not being good right now is not a very large line, but he certainly earned the minutes he's gotten recently. As soon as some other healthy guys come back, I don't think he'll play anymore. But what have you thought about how he's looked these last couple of games? Because again, even though I think he'll be probably out of the rotation once health comes, hard not to be at least a little encouraged for the Pacers that he's been able to play and not look like he doesn't belong at all.
I agree completely. I think when the Pacers drafted him, I think the day after, I said something along the lines of, great, can't wait to watch him play in Fort Wayne. And just kind of –
which should have – ideally, that should have happened. But
seriously. And then guys get hurt. And look, let's just be really honest about this Pacers team. There aren't very many guys who are defensively going to make a large impact. So when you've got a guy in Johnny Furphy who's tall – and he's long, even though he's not very thick, like you said, he's still really physical. And because he plays hard, because he's a rookie who's trying to earn minutes, he's able to be a little more impactful than I think some other guys have been on that side of the ball. And then, like you said, he shot the ball pretty well. There are some nights where he's not making shots and he doesn't play as much. But he's, like you said, he's earned the right to get thrown in there for 5 to 10 minutes a night. And if he's shooting the ball really well, like he was in Brooklyn, then, he can play 20 to 25 because the effort on defense is there. And this Pacers team hasn't shot the ball super great from 3 this year. And so having that guy to kind of help space the floor, the Pacers need that at times. And he's been able to do that.
Yeah, I don't – this is what I'll be the most curious about, obviously, is the shooting part. But he's currently taking 8 threes per 100 possessions and making 42% of them. Great. Sweet.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I don't know if that'll hold up, right? You never know with young guys. Even veteran players have seasons where they look awesome and then all of a sudden it goes away. But like Obi Toppin, for example, last year was at 40% and isn't close to that this year. But encouraging start that, and basically every time I've seen him doing some post-practice work, it's like threes and footwork for his jumpers, even that aren't threes, right? And the Pacers have been really good at transforming the jump shot of a lot of players to be better. So I think it'll be fascinating to see if he can hold this up as a shooter specifically. If some of the physicality stuff wanes as the season goes on, because guess what? He's going to hit a rookie wall. It's not a guess. It happens to every single player. So if he can keep shooting and that happens, even if his defense kind of wanes away, that'd be great. He's never missed a free throw in the NBA still. He's got to make some freaking layups, man. It's crazy how bad his finishing's been. He's shooting 39% on twos, worse than threes. It's remarkable how bad his finishing has been because he's been so good at so many other things. But I don't know if this defense can last forever, but the physicality's been nice. He's making the threes, and eventually this will stop. Both because I don't expect him to hold this up as a second-round pick and because they will get healthy. But I think encouraging from Furphy so far.
Yeah, like you said, he's been really good. I don't expect this to hold up. I expect that when Nesmith and Shepherd come back, he will wind up in Fort Wayne playing with the Mad Ants and doing all that. But like you said, it's really encouraging. They got him at the front end of the second round this year. I think he was the 36th pick, if I remember correctly.
They traded up one spot with cash, but yeah, close enough. Yes.
Yeah, it's when you're able to find guys in the second round, which it looks like the Pacers may have done with the last 3 guys that they've taken in the second round between Furphy, Shepherd, and Nembhard, that greatly accelerates your ability to rebuild. That's part of why the Pacers were so good last year. And if they found another guy who can play 14 minutes a night, and next year coming in, shooting threes and playing good defense, that is a great find in the second round.
It's remarkable that after pick 25, they've been really good. That's hard. But even before this iteration of the team, they picked Alize Johnson and Aaron Holiday was after that, I think, and Edmund Sumner was after that. Ikane Bogu was in the NBA for 2 years. They found dudes late first or in the second round for a long time, and of course now Nembhard, like you said, Nembhard, Shepherd, Furphy, they're finding stuff there, which is hard to do. But they need Furphy to be something especially if they trade other young guys. My argument for them making the pick at 36 the whole summer was, well, eventually if they trade their young guys for a stud, they need some young talent on the team. So pick this guy and hope he can be something. Well, so far so good. Last thing today, Jonathan Smith. Pacers play the Sixers tonight. They lost to a very, very bad Sixers team in their home opener in overtime. That was, in my opinion, before their last game. The Charlotte game has taken over this. That was, to me, their worst loss of the season until this past Sunday. They looked awful. it's so hard to lose a home opener, and they did.
Yeah.
That Sixers team was like 1-2-12 or something. Like that should have been a win. And now the Sixers got Embiid back, NPG back, and I can't believe it, but they just got their first win with Joel Embiid playing against the Bulls. This I know it's so crazy what their season has been.
It really is. It makes me laugh because I can't stand the Sixers.
I think that's a very common sentiment. I think that's very, very interesting.
Yeah,
you just don't like their vibe.
I don't like Joel Embiid. Joel Embiid. I'm not a fan of Paul George. He was great when he was here.
That I get from Pacers fans. Okay, that's
even just like I don't know, like Paul George is now a full-time podcaster and part-time NBA player. Like that is the point that he's reached.
So am I. And you've seen me play.
You said what?
So am I. Right?
Yeah,
right?
yeah, I guess. Yeah. But the difference is like, he's making $230 million or whatever contract he signed. Like,
right.
And so that's part of my gripes with them. But yeah.
I loved what their big three was on paper. They've had it for like 2 seconds of games. And the criticisms of their team being too small have proven to be totally true. Like when Embiid doesn't play, they look terrible. And Drummond hasn't helped them at all. That said, when Joel Embiid plays before last year, bad news for Myles Turner and typically the Pacers. Last year, the Pacers' pace allowed them to overcome that, made Embiid move, let them score a bunch of points. Bench lineups with Toppin at the 5, completely crushed against Philly. What to you is key for the Pacers to win what I would consider like kind of big game for them, even though Philly's not a good record team? If they beat Joel Embiid and get a road win, it'd be a nice win for them.
It would be. Myles Turner needs to avoid being awful against Joel Embiid as he has been in the past. That's obviously a big thing.
Huge.
Haliburton obviously has to play like his normal self. If he does that, then look, if Haliburton plays like his normal self, then the Pacers can beat anybody. Like that is the reality of it. But aside from those two really obvious things, I think the other thing is I think Mathurin needs to play well. Whenever he just gives them, I'm not saying he needs to go get 30, but if he can just have a solid 18 and he can rebound at the level that he's capable of doing, then I think that's really kind of the big thing. Mathurin needs to play well.
This is going to sound unbelievable given how that the Pacers are 10-15. Are you ready for a craziness here?
Sure.
The Pacers are 6-2 when Tyrese Haliburton scores 20 or more points. That's not even that high of a bar to clear. And their 2 losses are the first Philly game of the season, which I considered their worst loss, and that Raptors game where he was awesome and everybody else was just god-awful, right? Just god-awful.
Yeah, that Raptors game. I almost turned that one off. I was just like, I can't deal with this right
now. That was such bad turnovers that I didn't even know what to say. Like, how do you talk about a game like that? They just tripped all over themselves for 15 minutes. But I agree with you. Like, if Haliburton scores 20 points, just given what their offense is, they give themselves a chance. Last year, he ripped apart the Sixers. He had that 33-15 game in the in-season tournament win. He had 25-17 against them at home, right? Like, he had advantages in that matchup and took him over. He's got to do that because I don't think they have enough advantages anywhere else. Like, if they play slow, they'll lose, especially if all the stars for the Sixers play. So it's kind of got to be Haliburton. And even though it has not been as good as last year, the Haliburton-Turner two-man game is still producing pretty good points per possession numbers. So they need Myles Turner to be out there to do that, especially because they cut Moses Brown and they need center. So my key 3 things are pretty similar to you. Turner's got to play and play well. Haliburton's got to get to 20 points somehow. And my third key is to Obi Toppin. If Obi Toppin can play with pace and get those bench units running, regardless of who the Sixers center happens to be on the floor, that can give them an advantage that they've had in some recent games that haven't led to wins. And I think that's going to be important.
Yeah, I agree. You said earlier that Obi Toppin's not shooting as well as he did last year, which I find incredibly hard to believe because I feel like every time I watch the Pacers,
he's hot right now.
He sits in the front left or in the left corner, and he just doesn't miss. It's just, but yeah, that's why we need numbers, and we need
32.9% from 3 this season.
That feels so low, but okay,
he's been on fire recently for sure.
Yeah, all right, fair enough.
That would be his lowest season since his second season with the Knicks.
That's
so I suspect this. I'll just end with this rant from myself. I suspect he'll end the season like 36 or 37%. Like I bet he just started cold. It just so happens that like the whole team stunk, and so it hurt them a lot that would happen. Because he could have tweaked his form in a positive way, and now recently he's found those shots to go down again. So, and his career percentage is 35. It's going to go up, but how much?
Same as Trae Young.
The question, huh?
That's the same percentage as Trae Young.
It's so crazy because I watched Trae Young, and I'm like, man, he looks great this year. Like the balance of scoring and passing is there. The Hawks look awesome. They're top 10 defense last couple weeks. Then I look at his stats. I'm like, really?
Seriously, that's the way I feel. Yeah.
It makes me believe in the Hawks. Jonathan, thank you very much for the time.
Anytime, man.
I'm glad we could talk somewhere else this time. Where can people find you? The things you say about the every Indiana professional.
Sports. So you can follow me on Twitter at __ Jonathan Smith. You can check out my radio show. I'm on from 10 to noon every day. We've got a YouTube channel, Indy's Sports Ticket. We also stream live from my Twitter, excuse me. And then I've got like an extra YouTube channel called Shooting the Schmidt. I don't really know what it is yet, but it's fun. You should check that out too.
Commentary around basketball. I'm in tomorrow. We're talking Pacers, Sixers, whatever happens. Can the Pacers look like the Pacers and win a game that actually impresses people, or will they fall to 10-16? Hard to say that out loud. That sounds a lot worse than 10-15 for some reason, doesn't it? We'll see about that. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Back soon. Till then, have a great day.